Robert Feldman's a professor of psychology at the University of Massachusetts, my undergraduate alma mater, and he has a new study out in the Journal of Applied Social Psychology called Liar, Liar, Hard Drive on Fire, How Media Context Affects Lying Behavior. Professor, great to talk to you. I went through the study and read a lot about it and did some thinking about it. And first, give us the kind of basic premise, which is the idea that how likely one is to lie depends on whether you are having an in-person conversation, email, instant messenger, etc.
That's right. We were interested in whether being online gives you license to lie, or whether, in fact, if you're writing if you're writing to another person, that makes you more circumspect and therefore more truthful. It was based on the premise. We've done some other research, my students and I, where we've looked at the ways in which people lie in everyday conversations. And what we found was that it's actually quite extraordinary, the amount of lying that goes on. When people are face-to-face and getting to know one another, they lie on average about 3 times in a 10-minute period. The lies are all over the place. Some lies are very grandiose. Other lies, probably the majority of lies, are more mundane kinds of things that we would think of as white lies. But the point is that we lie a great deal, and it's part of our everyday kind of social niceties, in a sense.
Okay, so you're making a little bit of a distinction here kind of between, I guess, what we would call a grandiose or Newt Gingrich type lie, comparing himself to Margaret Thatcher, for example, or something like that, and then just maybe the so-called white lie, which could be either, I guess, would you call a white lie either a lie with no consequence or a lie to avoid hurting someone's feelings? What falls under a white lie?
Well, the latter. I would say that every lie has a consequence.
Okay.
It may not be a great consequence, but in fact, every lie, in one way or another, has eventually some impact. And most of the lies that people come up with are things to make other people feel good about themselves, or in a sense, to make the social conversation go more smoothly. So, for instance, if somebody says to me, "How do I feel?" and I might say, "Oh, I feel fine," when in fact, "Oh, I have a little cold," or "I don't really feel all that good, I'm really tired," I wouldn't necessarily tell them the truth. And it's not because I want to hurt them or I want to lie to them even. It's just because I understand that they really don't want to know all the details of my life. So it's a lie in a sense to protect the other person, as well as to just make things go more smoothly. Or if somebody says to me, "How do you like this tie I just bought?" I might say, "Oh, it looks great." When I may not think that, but I'm saying that simply because it allows it allows them to feel better about themselves. It allows me to be a nice guy. It's simply a kind of social convention that I tell people what it is that they want to hear.
So talk a little bit about the results and how much more likely is one to include these lies when communicating either via email or instant message versus in person.
Well, what we found was the main finding was that we brought people together who didn't know one another, and we either had them interact face-to-face or via email or via instant messaging. And what we found is that there were more lies when they were interacting in virtual means as opposed to face-to-face. And what we conclude from that is that when you interact with someone virtually, you kind of lose the facial cues. You lose the reactions they have, and it in a sense it increases the psychological distance between you and the person that you're talking with or interacting with virtually. So it just makes it easier to lie to someone when you're online than when you're interacting face to face.
Do you have any sense of, and this is probably certainly a different type of study, but given your background in studying and researching lying, do we have evidence about how the brain chemistry actually reacts when someone is telling a lie that they know to be a lie versus one of these so-called kind of white lies, so to speak? Is it the same, or is there a distinction in the brain?
Well, we really don't know the answer to that question. It's a great question. A lot of people are doing research on it, but right now we simply don't know. There's no way of telling whether a person's lying or being truthful, depending on what their brain looks like. People are, certainly the government's working on that in terms of screening people at airports, but there's really no way of knowing right now based on the existing science.
I was recently reading Jonah Lehrer's book, How We Decide, and Jonah is going to be on the show next week to talk about his new book about brain chemistry and creativity. And one of the interesting things he talks about with decision-making is that the decision-making activity in the brain for psychopaths is very, very different than for so-called normal people or non-psychopaths. Do you have a sense when we talk about somebody who has psychopathic behavior, is a lie or something that is untrue different in their mind? I don't know if you can elaborate on that a little.
Well, I would imagine that would be the case. Psychopaths, sociopaths are people who don't feel any guilt about lying. It's just something that will come very normally to them, and they don't think about the consequences of the lie. They don't worry particularly about being caught. They simply will lie if it's expedient. For most of us, we do worry about the consequences of lying, and we do worry about being caught, and we do worry about the results that our lies may have. That being said, in a lot of cases when we lie, we simply don't really think about it very much. We're not even aware of it. We lie almost reflexively. I talk to people all the time about my research, and they always say to me, well, I don't lie at the rate that you find in your studies. I tend to be very honest. And what I say to them is, just look at your own behavior over the course of a day. Look at the kinds of things that you say to other people, listen to what you're saying, and think about the number of times that you say something that's not quite accurate. And almost always people come back to me the next day and say, wow, I'm really surprised. I did say a lot of things that weren't true. So it's almost ingrained in us to be deceptive if we are socially skilled individuals. We want to tell people what they want to hear, and the other part of this is that other people actually want us to lie to them. We don't want to hear that we're looking like we've put on weight. We don't want to hear that we've done a bad job on some presentation. We want to hear things that are consistent with the positive view we try and maintain about ourselves. So in a sense, we almost welcome the lies that other people are coming up with.
What's your sense of how many times you've lied just during this interview?
Oh, in this case, I don't think I've lied at all. But you haven't asked me, how are you looking, or how do you feel, or how do I feel? I think if we got into the realm of a kind of social conversation,
right,
then it might have happened.
Well, the biggest lie I've told is that this interview is for a television program. I'm really just in my basement, and this doesn't go anywhere. No, I'm kidding. No, it's a fascinating study. We've been speaking with Professor Robert Feldman. He's a professor of psychology at the University of Massachusetts. The study is Liar, Liar, Hard Drive on Fire. Really a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks so much.
Nice talking with you. Thanks a lot.